Okay.
I saw on the radio, there was some problem with YouTube yesterday. They lost like 500,000 YouTube posts or something.
Really?
That's what I
Oh
was
boy.
yesterday.
It's a good thing I wasn't on YouTube yesterday. Okay, so the She'ilah, let me just see. No, you know what? This is not where we're up to. My apologies. We're up to volume 4. Okay. I think this is where we're up to. We're up to page 7 of this packet. I don't know. Okay, let me stop the share and try it again. The box of doom. Okay. Morning, Moish. Okay. Okay. The last thing that we had discussed was nullifying a sale before whether under what conditions can a person nullify a sale when a person failed to make full payment. So we're now ready to move on and to go on to another topic. And the new topic that we're going to discuss today is Kinyan Shanasa b'Shabbos be'Isser ha'imchal. If a transaction was made on Shabbos, does the transaction take effect? Okay, like the two guys in the back of the shul selling a car, they all joke. Yeah, Nit Shabbos Garet, yeah. Okay. She'ela, Mi shemochar b'Shabbos lelokeach al yedei echad midarchei hakinyanim. So a fellow sells an item using one of the methods of kinyan. Kagon shekana mechavero b'kinyan suder o al yedei mashicha. Let's say, for example, I give it to him, he pulls it towards him, or he does a kinyan chalipin by lifting a handkerchief. Ha'im kinyan chal ve'ein echad mehem yachol lachzer b'hamekach, o keven shenase hakinyan be'isser ein b'maseim klum ve'ein kan chalo shel kinyan. So is it a valid transaction? And therefore, if let's say after Shabbos someone wants to back out, they cannot? Or could we argue that since you're not allowed to make such a transaction on Shabbos, it was not a legal transaction. It could be nullified and voided. So the tshuva is hamocher v'hakona sha'asu iska beinehem b'Shabbos o b'yom tov al yidei echad mehakinyanim. So if they indeed do one of the methods of a legal kinyan, imzeh kinyan suder o hagba o mashicha, afal pi sha'asu iser hakoina v'hamakne, even though what was done is prohibited on Shabbos, nonetheless, hakinyan chal b'Shabbos ve'einem yicholm lachzer b'hem me'amekach. What was done, and they can't back out based on the fact that it was nit Shabbos Goret. Okay, that's a simple tshuva. He has all of the sources, but I don't find that to be something that we want to necessarily have to investigate any further. Let's
We're talking about
either party does not have the option of backing out just because it was done on Shabbos. Next.
Morning. Would also back that up, right?
Yes, assuming that it was done using one of the methods that the government recognizes. In other words, let's say there was no documentation, no paper, nothing, and one guy says, "Hey, you have my, my lawnmower, or no, you have my safer, and my book, and it's a very valuable book." And the other guy says, "Well, you gave it to me as a gift." So the other guy says, "Well, I gave it to you on Shabbos, and so that's not really legal. I wasn't allowed to give you a safer on Shabbos." We have this issue for a long time. I didn't want to give bar mitzvah books to the bar mitzvah boys for a couple of reasons. People thought I was from Mars. The office would prepare for me gift wrapped svarim to give to the bar mitzvah boy. And I always said, they're here for you to pick up after Shabbos. And when I first got here, people couldn't understand, like, why are you doing that? So I did it for a couple of reasons. Number one, they gift wrapped it, so it's muktzah because you have to tear open the wrapping in order to get the book, which you're not supposed to do on Shabbos. So I finally convinced them not to gift wrap it anymore. I was able to communicate those wishes fairly properly. But then you have the second issue, which is you're not supposed to make a kinyan on Shabbos. You're not supposed to give gifts on Shabbos and Yom Tov unless it's food that's consumable on Shabbos. So
if he could read the book, that's not
Learn
if he could learn Torah.
it doesn't that doesn't I don't think that mitigates the problem. Yeah. So what we do now is we have someone in the office makes a kinyan on behalf of the bar mitzvah boy, and they have the books now in a bag, a gift bag instead of gift wrapped, and that solves our
It
problem.
was already acquired before Shabbos.
Right.
Does the bar mitzvah have to agree with it though?
No,
It's good for them.
it's a good question. Bar mitzvah doesn't have to agree because we have a principle of zachin la'adam shelo b'fanav. We can create merit for a person in his absence. So since the acquisition of a new sefer is a merit, I think for most kids, maybe not all kids, maybe some kids would say I'd rather not have the sefer, but
Rather have Mad Magazine.
Mad Magazine, you're really dating yourself, Mike.
That's bar mitzvah present I got. A year's subscription.
A year's subscription.
It's just a couple
Gave
of
all
years
the
ago.
storm away, that kept the Mad Magazine.
What, me worry? Yeah, okay. All right. Kishiyesh vikuach bein hamocher lokoina ha'imshil. So let's go to the next slide. When there's a controversy or some dispute between the seller and the buyer, whether the buyer actually paid. So the shaila is like this: Misha kana mibal chanut mitzrachim mesuyamin. A person purchases whatever merchandise he needs from the merchant. O shekana kach v'kach schora, or it doesn't have to be in the market. It could be, let's say, a person buys from a supplier a certain amount of merchandise. Mahadin kishahakona toen sheshilem lemoicher, again a printing error, al osa kiniya ve'ilu hamoicher toen shadayin lo kibel mehakona tashlum al zeh. What's the halacha when the purchaser says, I paid you for these goods already, and the seller says, you haven't paid me? Ha'im hadin im hakoina o im hamocher. Who prevails in such a situation? Well, we have a general principle of hamotzi mechavero lefaraya. Once the person has taken possession is 9/10 of the law, and the fact that a buyer has possession of the items could be in itself evidence in halacha that he's the owner and that he's the rightful owner and that he paid for it. However, it's not so clear-cut in all situations. Okay, so the tshuva is kol sheyesh vikuach bein hamocher lekoina shezeh toin sheshilem avur hamekach v'hamocher toin shelo kibel avur hamitzrachim v'aschora tashlum al kach. Anytime there's such a dispute where the one person claims that he paid, and the seller claims that he did not receive payment, hadin oimer hamotzi mechavero olav harayah. So that's the standard halach. If you want to be able to, whoever is in possession of the goods has the upper hand, and if the seller therefore says he never paid me, he has to bring proof. V'lochein im hamekach kvar lakcho hakoina al hamocher lo haviraya shahakoina lo shilim k'dei lahotzi asatash lo mehakona. And therefore the burden of proof is on the seller who's already delivered the goods. V'im hamekach nimtza adayin eitzel hamocher. But if the seller is still in possession of the goods, Yachal hamocher lahachzik bo ad sheyavi hakoina raya shapara lemoicher abur mashakana v'rak oz yikabala. Then the seller can hold on to it until the buyer brings proof that he's already paid for these items, and then he has a right. Then he has to surrender. The seller has to surrender the goods. Umnam hamuchzak shemavakshim lahotzi miyadu tzarach lihishavish v'useses. Ulam bizmanenu beisadin nohagu shlo lahashpia elalasus pshara b'neya. The only thing is that normally the rabbis are required, even when a person is kofer bakol, even if he denies owing anything, and he says, I totally paid you, the Gemara says that the rabbis required what's called a shvuas heses, a rabbinic oath. Swear to us that you already paid, and we won't bother you anymore. The minhag today is that we no longer impose a shvua of any kind, even a rabbinic shvua.
Why are we?
Um, it's a good question. I've never really researched the history of shvuas heses and when it was it was finally seized. It was probably sometime around the 18th. I don't think it was that long ago, 18th or 19th century. But I really should research it, and when God willing, when I have the time, I will. So it seems to be pretty clear. It's a pretty straightforward halacha. They say that so the Beis Din will make some kind of pshara in a case where they can't impose the shvuas heses. I don't know what kind of pshara they can make on something like that, but he doesn't elaborate on that point. And we did see from when we were learning Rav Shraga's sefer that sometimes the Beis Din will impose, let's say, like a 20% pshara. Okay. Or a third pshara, I think we saw. 33% pshara. Okay.
So who would get one? 33 or.
But it doesn't seem reasonable in this case. The guy either paid or he didn't pay. It's not like there's a dispute on how much of the merchandise, what the cost of the merchandise was. It doesn't seem reasonable that there should be a pshara in this kind of situation. Okay. Next. Din hakoifes chaver limkar lo chayfetz. By the way, I just want to make a simple observation. I got a magazine in my mailbox before Yantiv by this organization, the Toronto Jewish Network, I think it's called, TJN. Yeah, and it's a group of industrious balabatim who are trying to raise awareness about how we need to work together to help each other with Parnassa. It's a down south organization. It's sort of like a wealth building effort to make sure that people can afford the cost of living and improve their situation. I think it's a valuable thing. It really hasn't come to our community yet. But anyway, so they sent out this magazine, and one of there was an article written by one of the rabbis on a Choshen Mishpat issue. And I think he missed the mark. Like, I think he quoted the halacha that we have all learned before, but he actually misapplied the halacha. One has to be very, very careful when learning these halachas to know how to apply them. The case was, what if I hire a ski instructor for an hour of ski instruction and I come a half an hour late to the instruction? So the halacha in the Talmud is that if you hire someone and you actually end up not using them for their labor, you don't have to pay them their full salary. You only have to pay them as a poel batel, as a worker who is out of work and would accept a certain minimal amount to be able to sit on the sidelines, and not have to work and get that time off. So the implication was, let's say a ski instructor gets $75 an hour. I don't know what, or $100 an hour, whatever he would get. If I came a half an hour late and I only end up getting half of the ski instruction, so I have to pay him $50 for the half hour that I used them for, and a lower amount for the first half hour that I didn't show up. And I think that's incorrect, because when you
Babysitter, you book a babysitter.
Yeah.
You cancel, like,
Yeah.
lost their parnus, you have to pay.
That's right. That's right. We talked about it with the babysitter. So the person who wrote the article was accurately quoting the Talmudic dictum, but I think he misapplied it. And so it's really, I think there's a raised awareness about Choshen Mishpat halacha, but we have to be careful how we apply these things and not misapply what we're learning.
It's just the halacha and the right thing to do.
Well, that's a separate issue, Hal. What I'm saying is even more than that. I'm saying that there was a misapplication of the halacha, so that I think the article was actually incorrect in halachic substance. Not, I don't even know who the guy
It's
is.
sure at the bottom of the article.
It doesn't.
No.
It doesn't. Yeah.
Maybe because he knew he was wrong.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Siman Hey. Din hakoifes chavero limkor lo chayfetz. She'ela. Misha machriach es chavero limkor eze davar shenimtza birshuso. So this gets into the question of applying pressure on someone to sell you, which the Torah actually prohibits. The Torah says when you pressure someone to sell you something, or when you pressure someone to buy something from you, both of them could be prohibited by the Torah. There's a prohibition of chamas. Chamas means forcibly taking something from someone, even when you're willing to pay for it, and applying undue pressure could be a form of chamas. Okay, Misha machriach es chaver limkar is a davar shenimtza birshuso, v'hu eno rotze lemochro. So I compel someone to sell me something, even though he doesn't want to sell it. But the guy hawks me a chinik until finally I agree to sell it to him. Well, under what circumstances can a person claim that he was coerced? It would be helpful to have Marv here today. He could tell us what secular law has to say about it. Under what conditions can a person claim that he was coerced and therefore he wishes to nullify the sale? Or can the court basically say, listen, the fact, get a spine. The fact that you sold it to him and you accepted his money is a sign that you sold it. So, you can't claim afterwards, oh, but he pushed me until I sold it. Or he pressured me until I sold it. So which one is the right attitude to take from a halachic standpoint? And I'm sure that there's probably something in Canadian law. Let's see. Chat GPT. We'll ask Chat GPT. What does I know. Okay. What does Ontario law? Just see. It's still thinking because the internet, for whatever reason, might be. What does Ontario law say about a person who claims that he was coerced or unduly coerced, pressured into a transaction that he now regrets? In Ontario, the law recognizes several doctrines that allow a person who was pressured, misled, or otherwise compromised when entering into a transaction to challenge, void, or rescind that transaction. Whether one of these applies depends on the nature of the pressure, the relationship between the parties, the degree of unfairness, and whether the pressured party had a realistic alternative. Below is a summary of key legal concepts, what the law says, and what a person claiming undue pressure might need to show. Number one, duress. Okay, so we've talked about duress before, and the Gemara does address duress, where a person is under such economic pressure that he's able to be exploited by a person who knows how to apply the pressure points. Okay. Undue influence. Undue influence is when someone in a position of power or trust over another person uses that relationship improperly so that the weaker person's will is overborne. It does not require physical threats. there are two classes: actual undue influence, where specific improper acts are proven, or presumed undue influence, which can arise from certain relationships, e.g., fiduciary relationships, parent-child, solicitor-client. Sure. Again, this would all be under this shaila. There are statutory protections for transactions that are unconscionable under the Unconscionable Transactions Relief Act. It can allow courts to relieve parties from obligations when there is a gross imbalance in power or unfairness in the transaction. It could relate to where one party's consent was not really free or informed, where one party was vulnerable, or where the stronger party exploited that to get terms that are very one-sided. You can certainly think about, let's say, elder abuse, right? Where you put undue pressure on a senior who feels very vulnerable, let's say to sell her house. There are certainly cases like that, and children can sometimes put pressure on their grandparents or parents. Okay. Consumer protection laws, domestic family contracts. Okay. What one must prove. If someone claims that they were unduly pressured, here's what they typically need to show. Nature of the pressure, like what kind of pressure was used, threats, persistent persuasion, misrepresentation. Both parties must look at whether pressure was wrongful or improper. Number two, no reasonable alternative. Did the pressured person have options? Could they refuse, delay, seek legal advice, or otherwise escape the pressure? If they had but didn't use them, that can weaken the claim. Vulnerability or inequality of bargaining power. Was the person in a weaker position financially, emotionally, because of dependency, etc.? Did they understand the terms? Awareness and understanding. Did the person know what they were agreeing to? Was the pressure such that it prevented free and informed consent? And finally, proof on a balance of probabilities. In civil law, one must show more likely than not that undue influence, duress, or unconscionability occurred. The burden is on the person challenging the contract. Often where relationships of trust exist, the burden shifts to the stronger party to show that there was no undue influence. Okay, so it's nuanced, obviously. So let's see what this Rabbi Cohen has to say. Misha koifes chaver limkar shelo v'nasan lo damim, hamachira chala ve'enu yachol lachzar bo. If a person coerces his friend to sell him an item, the sale is consummated, the sale is final, and the seller cannot retract. Ella shahakona nikra chamsan, but the purchaser is called a chamsan, a person who has committed chamas. Va'avar al isser Torah mishum lo sachmod, and he has violated the Torah prohibition of you shall not covet that which belongs to your neighbor to the point where you coerce him to relinquish it to you. Va'afilu b'machshava keshechoshev eich yikna hachefet shebiyad chavero over al isser lav shalo tit aveh. And even just thinking, how can I convince this guy to sell that item to me? It can be a biblical violation of lo sis aveh. You shall not lust after your friend's possessions, which is different. It's part of the 10 Commandments, but there's a difference between lo sachmod and lo sis aveh. Lo sachmod is acting on your desire to own that which belongs to your friend to the point where you pressure him to sell it to you. And lo sis aveh is where you just yearn for it in your heart. So that's a biblical violation, but of course there's no penalty for it. It's between you and Hashem, okay? Nimtza hamisaveh oiver belav echad, v'hakoine shehisaveh shehipzer bivolim over bishnei lavim, lekach nemar lo sachmod v'lo sisaveh, ela diyesh omrim sheshneim lav echad. So there's a dispute among the poskim whether it's really one negative violation or two separate violations. And it seems to me that this is an oversimplification of something that's very complex. I do believe that there would be cases, let's see. Okay.
Or-
Yeah. So he presents the sugya. This is probably a sugya that warrants unpacking a little bit. So it starts with the Gemara in Bava Kama. Amar lo Rav Ada Berei Rav Ivya lo Rav Ashi, Ma ha'hevdel ben Gazlan lechamsan. He asked him the following question: what is the difference between a Gazlan and a Chamsan? And Heishiv lo al zeh, Chamsan nosen kesef avor achefet shenotem in haba'olim shelo birtzonom elo b'kefiyah. Gazlan eno nosen kesef. So the difference is that a Gazlan, as we know, steals the item without paying for it. A Chamsan coerces the person to sell him the item and pays cash, but he's also violated the Torah. So Amar lo Rav b'temiha, Ada im nosen kesef chamsan atakari lo. So Rav was incredulous. He says, if a person pays cash, if for an item you're going to call him a chamsan, he's violated the Torah. Shahari nosam kesef abur mashalokach im kain kana oso kedino avshenikna shalo biritzon haba'olim v'ha'amar Rav Huna tal yuhu v'zavin zavine zavine. Didn't we learn from another rabbi, Rav Huna, that even if they string a guy up until he agrees to sell, it's a valid sale? So Meshiva HaGemara lo kasha, zeh shemachar mitoch ones nechsheves mechira b'mikre, she'amar rotza ani lamros shekafu osel hizbrach limkar, v'zeh she'amechira lo chala b'mikre, shelo amar rotza ani yulian sham. So the Gemara says it all depends. If a person is pressured to sell, and he says, all right, I'll sell it to you. So that's not something that can be challenged and based in. But if a person is insistent that he doesn't want to sell, but a gun is put to his head until he says, okay, I'll sell it to you, I don't want to die. So then that's a null sale. That's not a valid sale. You have to assess at what level the pressure. Right. So that's one sugya. Now there's another sugya in Bava Basra. Muvas mem rezushal Rav Huna mivaris devarav madua im kafu asolim kor mechira so mechira. They asked the question, why is it a valid sale if he was pressured? So Amar Rav Huna, afilu tal yuhu piush talu es abaolim v'inu osu b'yisurim v'zavenu machar zavine zvine mechira so mechira. Meaning, why did you say, Rav Huna, that even if they string a guy up until he finally agrees to sell, that it's a valid sale? B'sholin b'gemara matam adavar kishemachrichem adam limkor mechiraso mecher. Meshiva hagemara kol demazbin inish ilav da'anis lo hava mazbin kishemocher adam echafatzav im lo sha'anis hayamachmas adoicha kshiyesh lo tzarach achshav v'kesef lo hayamocher. So the Gemara says that in all reality, there's a degree of coercion anytime a person sells something. Meaning, unless you're in a business, let's say, where you're buying and selling constantly, but whenever you're selling personal effects, there's always a level of coercion. Like I'm starting to think about downsizing, right? Because, we got to pack up soon. We have some time, but I'm looking around the house now and saying, okay, what am I going to put on eBay? Like I've got a book that was written by Johnny Cash, that was signed and dedicated to my father by Johnny. But it's a biography of Jesus. so my mom gave it to me, and I was just checking on eBay last night, and I could get a few $100 for an autographed book by Johnny Cash, dedicated to my father. So
your father's name?
yeah.
Sell to the guy with the same name, that would be worth a lot of money.
Yeah, maybe.
How would they know it's authentic?
Hopefully his name is John.
So the truth is they wouldn't know that it's authentic, but there are handwriting, experts that can verify it. But that would be the chance. But
The pawn shop, they always call in people who specialize.
So yeah. Anyway, so I have it in my bedroom. It's called Man in White. It's all about because he wrote two books, Johnny Cash, Man in Black, which is an autobiography, and then he wrote Man in White, which is the story of Yashka. So it happened to be he gave my father that book because it was in the 80s when he had just published that. So Maybe he was trying to proselytize my dad. I don't know. Because he found religion. He was, a holy roller. Okay, anyway. Yeah. So we'll hold it here. And
Tshuva later in life, because he was.
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, he became a